Meanwhile, since other members are also joining in, can I just get a count like how many of our participants in this meeting are into practice or are from industry?
Shruti, we are good to go.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all present here. It is my privilege to introduce a speaker who brings not just experience but practical clarity to the world of auditing. We are honored to have with us CA Jagrit Tinani sir. With over 7 years of experience in risk based audit, internal audit, SOP formulation, and GST, along with valuable corporate exposure at ITC Limited. Sir carries deep insights into how strong internal controls shapes efficient organizations. Adding to this, his role at visiting faculty at ICI for artificial intelligence reflect his forward-thinking and future-ready approach. I'm sure today's sessions will give us not just knowledge, but a new perspective to apply in practice. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti, for the nice introduction of mine. So I'll just start with the topic, and before starting with the topic, I just want to understand by internal controls. I would appreciate if everyone participates, and so that it's not just one-way communication, and it's a two-way communication, so that we can deeply understand and we can get insights, and then we can understand and help each other. So, what do you mean by internal controls? Like, why internal control is necessary? I would like to know from your end. And like, since most of us are into practice, how do you think that in your own practice, internal controls helps us?
As good as internal controls are effective and efficient, we are safe to a larger extent.
It's like even in our offices, we do exercise different kind of controls. Like, if we are asking our client to provide any data, then we exercise control that the mail should be coming to this particular email ID, where we are
Yes.
also marked in CC, or our immediate juniors are marked into CC, so that the owners don't get into day-to-day activities of it, so that we can focus on into much more uh, important areas and prioritize our work accordingly. So it helps us in prioritizing our work. It helps us to expand. So, and for internet to be effective, it should be a top-down approach. If the owners or the management is also is not willing to establish the controls, then we at the bottom level internal controls will have no impact on it. So, starting, so this is the base where internal controls will start from. It should be a top-down approach and not just bottom-up approach. I'll share the PPT of mine. So as the topic was that what will be the controls, how to establish SOPs, and how we can use it, implement it. So these are the things that we'll be covering. Since most of us are into practice, we are into GST. We are ensuring income tax compliances. We are ensuring Companies Act, FEMA. Since the labor law has also changed, that needs to be also overseen. And when any kind of failure happens, it will be have a cascading effect, because one failure in GST, it might lead to several reportings in the future years as well. For example, supposedly if an input that had to be claimed in the earlier year, we have missed to claim it. That for that financial year, GSTR 9 needs to reflect that GST amount to be claimed, and in the next financial year also the effect will continue, because even in that financial year's GSTR 9 you will have to report it. So it has a cascading effect. So we need to ensure how we can establish controls so that the compliances which are there that can't be avoided is taken care of. So there are various aspects to it, but let's understand why the compliance failures occur. In most of the clients will treat the compliance as end activity. First, they will do the transaction, then the accounting will happen, and then at the time of checking, we'll get to know that these are the non-compliances that has already occurred. So rather, what it would, if the controls are there and it is formulated properly, then before initiating any transaction itself, the users in the organization will have a understanding that what are the steps that they need to take care before taking up any kind of transaction. Because in our financial world, each and every transaction, financial transaction particularly, will have an impact on our finances, and then accordingly we need to have proper approvals or proper authorizations and proper disclosures as well. Supposedly, if any loan to directors has been done, has been extended, so we need to ensure that Section 185, Section 186, and 188, all these three compliances are read in congruence. Because if it is not allowed in the if it is not properly authorized, but transaction has already happened, there is no way back to it. So we need to understand, like, the compliance should not be considered as an end activity, rather it should be considered as the primary flow while doing any transaction. Secondly, in most of the places, even after today AI has come into being, many people are talking about AI. We are implementing AI in our day-to-day activities. Department is using chat GPT and other softwares to send the notices. But still, many a times, even big organizations are having controls which are manually driven. We are still, there are many processes and many calculations that are being done off the ERP system and on an Excel sheet, because of which if there's any error is not being able to track properly. Thirdly, the controls are might be there, but it is not properly documented. Basically, controls, when properly documented and properly explained, is what SOP is all about. SOP doesn't only covers the control, it ensures proper SOD is there or not. It ensures proper maker and checker control is there or not. So when the controls are formulated in a manner which provides what are the steps to it, who are the responsible persons in each of the process or each of the steps, and proper authorization or DOP, delegation of powers, are defined, then we can say that SOPs have been formulated properly, which controls the particular process or function. There are various data that are distributed amongst various, for a production company, for a factory, production data is coming from the production team, the payroll data is coming from the HR team. So, but everything is having an impact on the finances. So the data is very much fragmented. So how to, if the things are formulated properly, if the reportings are made aware, if the organization is aware that who is responsible for what, that too in a documented manner, no single person will be able to escape through their responsibilities. So they will be responsible for the task they are doing. They will be having a deadline wherein they need to submit the data, so that proactively we can take decisions and take corrective actions and not just preventive actions on it. Because if the preventive controls are there but it has been breached, then we only have the option of doing the taking up the corrective action only. And many a times, even after proper SOPs are aligned with the organization structure, the companies or the organization do not control it, do not monitor it. everything needs to be monitored in a periodical manner. I will not be saying that we should monitor it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, but quarterly or half yearly basis if monitoring is being done, so that before the financial year ends, we can take corrective action and we can control it. So there are various aspects to it, which we'll discuss later. So earlier, internal control, internal audit was a very common thing that was being done, and that was a little bit near to what we are doing in the statutory audit itself. But the dynamic time which is there, the focus from internal audit has now been shifted to risk-based audit, wherein we analyze which are the risky process, we make the risk matrix, and then accordingly we design our audit procedures so that we can understand where are the loopholes or where are the weaknesses are, so that those loopholes or those weaknesses can be targeted and we can improve those processes and bring efficiency. So as I had explained earlier, what is the traditional practice? First, the transaction is being initiated, then the accounting is being done, then review is being done, and then compliance comes. So compliance is the end goal. Rather, it should be the first thing in the process. So this is the approach of this needs to change. We need to explain to our clients, or to we need to inculcate in ourselves that before doing any transaction, we ensure that the at the time of doing the transaction that compliance is being taken care of. How the modern approach that should be, we should define what are the business process. We should ensure controls are embedded. System should be validating it, not us, and then it will automatically lead to compliances. So for this, I'll give you an example of how TDS works. So at the time of, like, supposedly for professional fees only, I'm taking an example. Why what we said is user access management or vendor master creation. When it is being done at that point of time itself, vendor master creation is a business process. So at that time we will ensure that what kind of service is being procured. Supposedly for me, we are professionals. Supposedly our ledger, say Jagrit Tenani's ledger is being created, vendor is being created in a client's books. At that point of time only, we'll define that this is a service that will be offered. TDS rate on this should be 10%, or supposedly if there are lower TDS certificates, then that should be defined, and that should also be documented at that point of time itself, that why not 10% is being deducted. So that exception reporting should be there in the system itself. So these are the embedded controls that we are talking about. So once the vendor master is created properly, the it is defined that the party is GST registered. So at the time of GST registration, we ensure that GST number is being fed properly, so that the data from GST department and the data provided by the vendor masters are in line or not. That should be done by the system itself, because in Tally also, when we use the GST number and we fetch the GST details, the address and other details automatically gets populated. So that's the system validation that is being provided by the ERP itself. Now, when all these things have already been taken place, now any transaction is being done. Suppose if I'm raising an advice and tax invoice or rupees 1 lakh plus 18% GST. So at the time of recording itself, the system will trigger that 10% TDS should have been deducted, and it will deduct the TDS, and it will not be posted. It will be parked in the system, wherein the seniors or the respective departments will authorize it, and then it will be posted. So this is how the risk-based controls are ensured, and compliances are automatically are taking place without we interfering it. So at whenever the data, any task is automated or system is doing it, the chance of getting the error gets neglected and it gets reduced. So once it if the errors are reduced, so automatically the company's compliance checks gets improved and they are more compliant. So now we need to explain why internal controls are necessary. When, as I said, it should be a top-down approach. The management should understand that petty things needs to be ignored. wherein the most important things, the more riskier areas or where leakages can happen should be taken care of so that the management themselves can focus on more effective and efficient task and grow. It is not the management's responsibility to take care of each and every transaction that is being done, for which processes needs to be defined so that the organization's asset can be protected, because misuse of supposedly if there's any cash embezzlement and if proper controls are not there, then automatically the organization's assets are being tampered with and the organization will face a loss. For this, the top management should ensure controls are there, but at the same time, those checkpoints are there so that proper any when any kind of exception is being there is happens, reporting is there, and accordingly compliances can be done, because ultimately if the company is efficient, the top line will increase, and if the top line is increasing, the bottom line will increase automatically. So this is the purpose of internal controls, wherein the management can focus on more important areas where the business can grow through diversification, through acquisitions, or by laying off or by removing those business plans or business activities which are not necessary for them. So how the internal control architecture will work? We need to understand what are the control environment. We need to ensure risk assessment. I'll come on each of these topics one by one. First, I'm just explaining what are the activities that needs to be controlled, how information and communication is being passed is happening in the system, and the last is the monitoring. First, let me explain what is control environment. Control environment means that what are the systems that are in place, what is the kind of industry in which the company is operating, what is the organization structure. Suppose if it's a proprietorship company and it's a supposedly a 5 crore 10 crore company, in if in that company I'm wanting to establish internal control, then it will be useless, because the cost benefit analysis will not come. The cost will be more than the benefit that they will derive. But if the company is having turnover of rupees 50 crores today, but they are planning to increase it to, it will increase in future, say 100 crores 200 crores, and later they want to come for an IPO. In that case, we need to understand at this point of time, so that for future prospect we can control it from today itself, and so that because whenever investors come, they do check what kind of controls have been established, whether there are any kind of personal expenses also being booked in the company or not. So all these things need to be understood. So for this, we need to understand the purpose of the organization's management. What is the purpose behind it? What are the systems that the organization is using? What is the organization structure in it? Who are the investors or the equity participant in it, so that basis which we can formulate the we can understand the control environment. Because in for for any control, we need to understand the organization structure. If there are layers of people in it, that will help us in understanding what can the SOD be like, what will be the DOP be like, who will be the maker and who will be the checker in it, what kind of transaction is the company doing. If the transaction limits are very high, then accordingly the DOP will be set, so that the supposedly if a company is having transactions of rupees 1 lakh only, maximum 1 lakh, so we need to delegate the power of authorization of payments, like say up to 10,000 a manager can approve. Beyond 10,000 to 50,000, manager will create it and his senior executive would approve it. And above 50,000, the director's approval would be needed as well. So this is how we need to understand how the DOP will be formulated. Second is the risk assessment. For any company, revenue leakage is a very big task, and to understand whether revenue is being recognized properly or not is again a big task. What happened with Byju's? I'm giving you the example of Byju's because their revenue model was inappropriate in line with the accounting standards, because whatever amount they were receiving they were showing it as their revenue. However, even if the money that they were recording, the services were not being rendered, it should be had it should be shown as advance from customers and not just revenue. So we need to understand whether the what are the risk areas. That's why I mentioned that we need to the focus these days should shift from internal audit to risk-based audit, wherein only the riskier areas which are there can be audited. We need to identify the areas. We need to assess what are the risks that is being associated with those particular areas, keeping in mind the nature of business, nature of industry, and the organization structure, basis which risk assessment should be done. Just mere assessment is doing risk assessment will not serve the purpose, because if the organization structure is not defined properly, then DOPs and other controls can't be established. Basis the risk assessment done, will understand what are the activities that needs to be done, that needs to be controlled, or for which SOPs or controls needs to be designed with. How to communicate these things to the people in the organization, how information will flow, what are the data points, whether those data points can be altered or not. Ensuring all this comes under information and communication. And fourth is the monitoring, that is the audit or periodical reviews that we are doing. So I would request if there are any questions till now or any clarity that is needed in understanding.
I have a question.
Yes,
So, in your experience, what do you think is the biggest mistake that organizations make when they are designing these controls? I heard you say that the cost parameters have to be kept in mind. So, is
definitely.
that the thing that is most crucial? Or from the perspective of two smaller organizations don't need a system of SOPs? Only when you are at a certain threshold of revenue making is SOP and internal control imperative.
No, for this, I would say that controls are needed everywhere. But for an organization where they are not doing great, they are at the initial stage. The team is not there. Many a times when when a person is starting their business or any startup is being started, there are only 3 4 people within the organization. They are doing every task at that given point of time. If you want to establish controls, that will, even if you design the controls, that would be ineffective, because the 4 founders who are there, they are having their own domain, so they should be in charge of their own domain. And once they have a team size, they have an structure in place, then those SOPs should come into picture. Because if today I am not sure how things will go on, and because of these controls, there's a one negative point of these controls is that at times, because of these controls, the decisions that you make gets delayed, because the approvals needs to be there. So this is a setback of it, but the in long run this will help in ensuring that things are running in a positive way or in a fruitful manner. Was I able to answer your query, ma'am?
Yes, yes, you were. But so in my experience, what I found is that companies which don't have controls set up in the initial stages, especially the payment approval system, it is very difficult to get into the culture of getting that authority matrix set in, because once the financials decisions are controlled by the promoters and founders, to get in the managerial workflow of payment approval, it tends to be um, little constrained, from that the control aspect. The
Definitely,
promoters and founders.
definitely that's why what I said, that control should be a top-down approach and not bottom-up approach. So if the promoters or the management itself are overriding the controls, the entire point of establishing the internal controls will fail. So in if the management doesn't want to, and since supposedly कोई अगर lower level का staff है, employee है, and if he's being directed by the director of the company कि ये payment हो जाना चाहिए आज, at that given point of time, that employee will not see the DOP. They will make the payment. So that's why I said it should be a top to bottom approach, wherein the management themselves understand that they should not override the controls. If any exceptions are there, that exception should be documented. It is not like that कि you आपको ये चीज rigorously follow करनी है, but it should not be a habit. कभी कोई exception अगर आया है, at that given point of time, you can record that instance, take approvals later that because of this you have approved it and the transaction has occurred. So for any kind of controls that will be designing, that exception list would be there, and to deal with those exception would also be defined in the SOPs. That's what we say exception reporting, wherein supposedly if a transaction that was say of rupees 10 lakh that was not within my power was initiated by me and was made and was done directly by the director or someone. So that exceptional reporting should be there, wherein proper process notes are available along with it. So as auditors, as chartered accountant, we will also be sure that no fraudulent activity has taken place. So there are three types of controls which we use it almost every time: preventive control, detective control, and corrective control. So preventive control is the system validation that I was talking about. Like for the example that I took of vendor management, vendor creation that is being done. At that point of time, we are ensuring that 10% TDS is being fed into. So that is a system validation that is being done. But even after that, when the reports are being generated, a manual reconciliation should be done or ensured, wherein both should reconcile. If any error happens at that given point of time itself, will ensure that we can look back into the system and check what went wrong, or supposedly if at the time of choosing services by mistake goods were chosen, so automatically instead of 10%, 2% TDS has been deducted into it, or any other rate of TDS has been deducted into it, or supposedly services has been selected, but instead of professional fees I've mentioned as commission. So that from 10% to 2% jump has happened. So we need to ensure reconciliations are there at proper stages so that we can detect if anything is going wrong or not. And last is the corrective control. Supposedly the 10% TDS had to be deducted, but later we found 2%, 2% was deducted, but later we found that 10% TDS had to be deducted. At that point of time, we'll pay the 8% additional amount and we'll pay the interest and whatever other consequences are. So these are the type of controls that needs to be there. It can be various kind of controls that we establish. For I gave an example of TDS, so that is something which we relate on a very day-to-day basis. So accordingly, when we are doing the risk parameter analysis, risk-based analysis, we'll understand these are the riskier areas. So for this, what kind of controls needs to be established, how it can be detected, and suppose if even after ensuring preventive controls and detective controls are in place, error has happened. What is the corrective action that needs to be done? So these are the basic. That's why when I said we need to ensure that we need to identify what are the areas, do the risk analysis. These are the riskier things. We'll set the controls, discuss with the management whether if it is feasible or not, or we'll change it as per the needs, and then we'll implement it. Now, what is SOP? Till now, I was talking about controls everywhere. SOPs are nothing but a formulated, a documented form of the controls that we are talking about, wherein each and every controls that we want to implement or we want to ensure is defined properly and in detail, along with the exception reporting that I had mentioned. Will define who is responsible for which activity. If anything goes wrong, what are the approval mechanism that needs to be done? what are the documentation that is needed. Now for example, I take an example of a big conglomerate, say ITC. आईटीसी के हर एक स्टेट में मल्टीपल रजिस्ट्रेशन तो पॉसिबल होगा नहीं जीएसटी के लिए. दे विल टेक ओनली जी वन जीएसटी रजिस्ट्रेशन. अब इतने एक ही स्टेट में दे आर मल्टीपल फैक्ट्रीज और मल्टीपल प्लेस ऑफ बिजनेसेस जहां से वो डेटा फ्लो इन होगा. तो यहाँ पे चेक पॉइंट्स किसका है? जो एक जगह से रिटर्न फाइल हो रहा है, दे आर नॉट रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर इफ एनी रॉन्ग डेटा कम्स टू देम ऑफ एन अनदर फैक्ट्री और देयर एचओ, because one return would be filed. They need to consolidate it. उसमें पूरा स्टेप बाय स्टेप प्रोसेस डिफाइंड रहेगा कि दे नीड टू इंश्योर, सपोज जीएसटीआर 1, दे विल इंश्योर दैट प्रॉपरली डेटा जो भी उनका पोर्टल हो या कोई कहीं पे भी वो अपलोड हो जाना चाहिए. वहां पे कुछ भी अगर इफ दे फाइंड द एरर, वो वहां से कम्युनिकेट होके पर्टिकुलर ब्रांच या पर्टिकुलर यूनिट में जाएंगे. दे विल करेक्ट इट, देन इट विल गो. यहाँ पे रोल्स एंड एक एक प्रोसेस डिफाइंड है, किसका ये काम है, किसका क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है वो डिफाइंड है. यहाँ पे चेक पॉइंट ये हो गया कि अगर कुछ गलत डेटा जा रहा है, सपोज जीएसटी नंबर इज रॉन्ग, उनका सिस्टम वैलिडेशन इतना स्ट्रांग रहता है कि जल्दी से होता नहीं, बट सपोजली इफ इट इज रॉन्ग, देन एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम कंट्रोल चेक पॉइंट इज दैट बिफोर जैसे ही अपलोड होता है सिस्टम एरर फ्लो कर देता है एंड अपने को बता दिया जाता है कि दिस आर दी जीएसटी नंबर्स विच आर रॉन्ग. और यहाँ पे suppose it's a duplicate invoice that is being reported, that comes automatically. What are the document requirements? हर एक यूनिट का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि वॉट एवर डॉक्यूमेंट्स दे आर सेंडिंग फॉर अप्रूवल फॉर जीएसटी फाइलिंग, उसका एक बैकअप उनके पास होना चाहिए जहाँ पे एक एक चीज डिफाइंड रहेगा कि इसके बेसिस में हमने किया. या कोई सपोज हम इनवॉइस नहीं किए, वो कैंसिल अगर हुआ तो उसका उसमें भी डिटेल दे शुड हैव डॉक्यूमेंटेड द रीजन दैट व्हाई दैट invoice was cancelled. So this is how the SOPs are maintained. It defines who will be responsible for it, documentation required. If any exceptions are there, that will be defined, and then will check as per the SOP that task was executed or not. कंप्लायंस ऑटोमेशन फ्रेमवर्क, ये मैंने आप पहले भी एक्सप्लेन किया है, वही सेम चीज यहाँ पे रिपीट है थोड़ा सा आइडेंटिफाई करने के लिए कि कैसे सपोज टीडीएस का कंप्लायंस है या जीएसटी का कंप्लायंस है या फेमा का कंप्लायंस है. वी नीड टू आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट आर द रेगुलेशंस फ्रॉम कंप्लायंस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू. आई एम जस्ट एक्सप्लेनिंग कि अब हमें अगर टीडीएस का है या जीएसटी का है तो व्हाट आर द रेगुलेशंस. वी शुड नॉट बी
Javed,
टेकिंग.
if I may interrupt, there's a question from Shruti. She
Yes.
wants to question, inquire as to how to ensure SOPs are actually followed and not just documented. So how would you, in your capacity as a professional, ensure that these are being actually followed? What measures or steps that you take?
So when I mentioned we need to monitor the controls, आप अगर ऑडिट करना स्टार्ट कर रहे हो, रिव्यू करना स्टार्ट कर रहे हो, you will be taking the SOPs, you will understand what are the SOPs being followed. Then for those processes, you will establish control. You will check on sample basis or basis your scope of work. You will check if any exceptions were there, whether proper documentation were maintained or not, whether proper approvals were taken or not. So it will depend upon what is the scope of work that you are doing, taking up, and whether the company is ensuring monitoring is being done or not. So just formulating the SOP will not help you unless until you are monitoring it. जैसे मैंने इनिशियली भी बोला था ये चीज, आपको लास्ट में मॉनिटर करना पड़ेगा. आपने खाली बना के रख लिया and then you're not checking if it is being complied or not, then it is as good as that you don't make it. खाली आप ये बोल रहे हो कि आज सपोज आई गिव अ वेरी नॉर्मल एग्जांपल, अपने को जीएसटी में पता है कि ये सब चीज करना है, द लॉज आर लेड डाउन, बट स्टिल पीपल डू मिस्टेक्स ना. तो वो लॉ बनाने से नहीं होगा, वो आपको चेक करते रहना पड़ेगा ऑन अ रेगुलर बेसिस वेदर द compliances or that control is working effectively or not by checking the process itself. And at the same time, the way things are changing, मैंने एक एसओपी बना के रखा था पेरोल के लिए फॉर एग्जांपल. अब पेरोल में अचानक से दिसंबर में चेंजेस आ गए. दोस चेंजेस नीड्स टू बी अपडेटेड इन द एसओपी. तो आपको एसओपी का ऐसा नहीं कि आपने आज बना लिया वो हमेशा के लिए फिक्स हो जाएगा. आपको जैसे जैसे आप आज आप टैली यूज कर रहे हो, सपोज टुमारो यू मूव टू एसएपी, इन दैट केस ऑफ आपको सैप के बेसिस पे आपको कंट्रोल्स डिफाइन करने पड़ेंगे, उसके बेसिस पे द रोल्स एंड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज विल चेंज, उसके बेसिस पे एक्सेप्शन रिपोर्टिंग विल चेंज, उसके बेसिस पे आपका डॉक्यूमेंटेशन जो हो रहा है वो चेंज हो जाएगा। आप कैसे पहले वेंडर क्रिएट कर रहे थे, टैली में वेंडर क्रिएट करना इज वेरी इजी, ज़ोम में वेंडर क्रिएट करना इज वेरी इजी, एसएपी में उसमें बहुत सारे चेक पॉइंट्स रहते हैं, तो आपको वो डिफाइन करने पड़ेंगे, तो आपको पीरियोडिकल रिव्यू करना पड़ेगा। ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का नीड अगर चेंज हो रहा है, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का स्ट्रक्चर अगर चेंज हो रहा है, पहले आप एएस फॉलो कर रहे थे, नाउ द कंपनी हैज इन्वेस्टर्स जिसमें मेजोरिटी शेयरहोल्डिंग लिस्टेड कंपनीज की है या उन पे इंड एस एप्लीकेबल हो जा रहा है, तो इंड एस के बेसिस पे आपको चेक्स रिवाइज करने पड़ेंगे ना। आपने इंड एएस के बेसिस पे अकाउंटिंग प्रोसेस डिफाइन किया था, अब जब व्हेन यू आर शिफ्टिंग फ्रॉम इंड एएस टू इंड एएस, देन दैट एसओपी नीड्स टू incorporate it in itself, that periodical review needs to be there. Once I've made it, and if I think that this will continue for the entire life, that is not a correct approach, first of all, because the dynamic changes that are happening, it's so dynamic that we need to review the SOPs on a, if not on an half yearly basis, at least on an annually basis we must review it and understand how things have changed, because in last 6 months, since September till date, there have been multiple changes in GST filing itself. सो ये हमें एसओपी में डिफाइन करना पड़ेगा। ये मैं बोलूंगा कि 6 महीने बाद मैं उसको एसओपी को रिवाइज करूंगा, दैट विल नॉट सर्व द पर्पस, तो आपका पुराने के बेसिस पे चल रहा है, गलती अगर हो रहा है तो हो रहा है, दैट यू कैन अफोर्ड। तो जैसे जैसे चेंजेस आ रहे हैं, रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क में चेंजेस आ रहे हैं, वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड, वी नीड टू अपडेट दी एसओपीज एज वेल। सो वाज आई एबल टू आंसर द क्वेरी दैट वाज आस्क्ड?
Yes, sir. So basically, we monitor the SOPs also and upgrade our SOPs time to time
डेफिनेटली,
basis.
डेफिनेटली। आपने अभी एक बार कर दिया, सपोजली इन लास्ट 6 months they have abhi recent में the way GSR 3B is being filed, additional step has come where you need to add the breakup liability also, if any. In that case, my old SOP will not help me ना, और old process that I was following will not help me, वो मुझे बताना पड़ेगा। ठीक है, अभी बहुत बार ऐसा होगा कि छोटा सा चेंज आया, पीपल एक और ओरल कम्युनिकेशन आ गया, दैट हैज बीन डन, बट अगेन आपका वो डॉक्यूमेंटेड नहीं है कहीं पे, तो आप डॉक्यूमेंट करके रखो ताकि सपोज इफ समवन न्यू जॉइंस टुमारो, वो एसओपी शुड बी that simple and that easy to understand that a new joinee can easily go through it and understand it and start implementing it in the activity for which they have been hired for. तो अभी मैं वापस compliance automation framework पे आता हूँ. So we'll need to identify what are the regulations. Supposedly for GST itself, if there are any invoices of food and beverages that for which you can't claim GST because it is blocked under 17 subsection 5, तो आप उसको आइडेंटिफाइड रहेगा आपके पास, आपके ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में वो लिस्ट प्रोवाइडेड है, सिस्टम जैसे आप उसको करोगे कि ये एचएसएन डिटेल्स डाल रहे हैं अपने एग्जांपल के लिए, ऑटोमेटिकली बोलेगा कि ये एचएसएन मेरा फूड आइटम है, इसका आपको इनपुट लेने नहीं मिलेगा। But at the same time, अगर मैं if I'm trying to use this GST for someone who is into the same line of business, then it will be wrong. इसलिए मैंने बोला ये बहुत ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्पेसिफिक होता है, इंडस्ट्री स्पेसिफिक होता है। अब सपोजली if a company is into, two companies are there, same into same line of business, but still the control mechanism for the two companies can be different and will be different. It can't be same because the way of operating for the two companies can be different. The organization structure of the two companies can be different. The softwares that they are using can be different. So we'll identify the regulations, will map the compliance triggers. जैसे मैंने अभी बोला कि आपको HSN के बेसिस पे आपको ट्रिगर हो जाएगा कि इसका इनपुट लेना अलाउ नहीं है, सिस्टम ने ट्रिगर कर दिया, आप उसको उसका इनपुट आपने ले लिया, या वो आपको पता है कि उसका HSN में आपने एक नया बिजनेस स्टार्ट किया जो कि सिस्टम में अपडेटेड नहीं था, आपने उस दैट परचेज दैट यू हैव डन इज अ वन टाइम परचेज, बट उस फॉर दैट यू विल बी एलिजिबल फॉर द इनपुट, तो आपको वहां पे उसको ओवरराइड करने के लिए आपको परमिशंस लेने पड़ेंगे। आपको वो परमिशंस को कंट्रोल्स ऑलरेडी एम्बेडेड रहेंगे जहां आपके सीनियर्स अप्रूव करेंगे उस चीज को, एंड देन उसका ऑटोमेटिकली वैलिडेट होगा, ये मेरा एक्सेप्शन में चला जाएगा। ताकि कल को जब आप खुद भी चेक करोगे, देन यू विल अंडरस्टैंड दैट दिस इज समथिंग दैट वाज एन एक्सेप्शनल। दो मेरा आउटसाइड बिजनेस का था, वन टाइम अपॉर्चुनिटी आया, आई टुक इट, आई इनिशिएटेड द ट्रांजैक्शन सो दैट मेरा रेवेन्यू हार्म नहीं हो, अल्टीमेटली मेरा बॉटम लाइन शुड नॉट हार्म। बट अगेन अब यहाँ पे सपोजली प्राइवेट लिमिटेड कंपनी है, हु इज इनटू बिजनेस से आईटी इंडस्ट्री में है, अब वो अचानक से फूड का बिजनेस में अगर जा रहा है, तो वो कंप्लायंस पॉइंट मेरे को बाद में नहीं पता होना चाहिए। अगर वहां पे है तो वो सबसे पहले यहाँ पे आइडेंटिफाई होना कि मेरा हैव आई अमेंडेड माई एमओए एओए और नॉट, या फिर उसको मैं अदर इनकम में दिख, वो मेरा अदर इनकम का पार्ट होना चाहिए, नॉट रेवेन्यू फ्रॉम ऑपरेशंस। तो दैट थिंग शुड बी देयर। तो ये मेरा ट्रांजैक्शन स्टार्ट करने से पहले आना चाहिए, ऐसा नहीं कि ट्रांजैक्शन खत्म होने के बाद आ रहा है। दो ये मेरा एक्सेप्शन रिपोर्टिंग में चला जाएगा, बट अगर ये एक्सेप्शन रिपोर्टिंग सपोजली क्वार्टरली बेसिस पे हो रहा है एंड दैट ट्रांजैक्शन को हुए 2 महीने हो गए एंड ईयर क्रॉस हो गया, तो फिर अपने कैसे उसको करेक्ट करेंगे। ये सारे नॉर्मल एरियाज है जो अपने ऑटोमेट कर सकते हैं ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ बाय यूजिंग एआई। एंड बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसी होती है, एआई इज अ बबल बीइंग एन एआई फैकल्टी एट इंस्टीट्यूट। बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसी है, इट कैन हेल्प यू। वो आपका एक्सेल में काम हो रहा है या आपके मैक्रोज ही काम करे, बट आपको मैक्रो टाइप नहीं करना पड़ रहा है। दैट मैक्रो कोडिंग इज बीइंग डन बाय एआई विच यू आर इम्प्लीमेंटिंग इट। तो एवरीथिंग बोला कि हम लोग एआई से काम कर रहे हैं, सब चीज इज नॉट करेक्ट, बट उसका बेसिस जो आ रहा है वो एआई से आ रहा है। जैसे आपने जीसा टू बी रिकंसिलिएशन आपने एआई के बेसिस पे मॉडल बनाया एंड दैट इज नाउ बीइंग टेकन केयर बाय दैट एक्सेल फाइल इटसेल्फ या बाय दैट जावा यूटिलिटी इटसेल्फ। तो वो सब हमें चेक करनी है कि वो सब चीज कैसे ऑटोमेट कर सकते हैं जहाँ पे ह्यूमन इंटरवेंशन कम हो। बट एट द सेम टाइम हमें ये चीज इंश्योर करना है कि वो एक रिकंसिलिएशन हम बना के रखें अपने साथ, चेक पॉइंट्स बना के रखें जहाँ सो दैट वी कैन ensure that things are done as per regulations or as per law. ये मैंने पहले एक्सप्लेन कर दिया था, इसको मैं अब दूसरा एग्जांपल लेके आपको एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ कि वेंडर के जगह में आप लोग या कोई आई वुड आस्क द ऑडियंस टू गिव मी अ process that I can explain because this I've already explained. Is there any area that we professionals can think of? Since no
Anyone?
topic, sorry,
Reconciliation. Gitanjali wants to understand from the
which
reconciliation.
reconciliation? Sorry.
No, I don't want to understand. I have taken this point that this can be added as a control.
Right. Okay.
Mm, I'll explain how we can how we can ensure controls in fixed asset uh, of the company या depreciations कैसे अपने इनिशिएट कर इंश्योर कर सकते हैं कि वो प्रॉपरली हो। तो पहले कैपिटलाइजेशन ऑफ फिक्स एसेट व्हिच आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, या फिर इंश्योरिंग कि हमारे फिक्स एसेट रेशियो में वॉट एवर थिंग्स आर कमिंग इन इज करेक्ट और नॉट। सबसे पहले वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड हमारी अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी क्या है उसमें, वेदर वी आर फॉलोइंग एसएलएम और डब्ल्यूडीवी। कोई कोई इंडस्ट्री में एसएलएम ही बोल दिया जाता है कि दे शुड फॉलो एसएलएम ओनली, या हमारा पहले डब्ल्यूडीवी था, अब हम एसएलएम में करना चाह रहे हैं। तो बिकॉज अभी हमारा डेप्रिसिएशन इज चेंज इन एस्टिमेट एंड नॉट चेंज इन अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी, तो हमारे हमारा फाइनेंशियल में और देने का नीड नहीं है, या फिर हमें प्रायर पीरियड बना के करने का आइटम नीड नहीं है। हम लोग ड्यूरिंग द ईयर से ही उसका इफेक्ट लेके कर सकते हैं। तो फिक्स एसेट जब कोई नया परचेज हो रहा है, तो वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट वो कौन से डिपार्टमेंट से अप्रूवल आ रहा है उनका, वो डिपार्टमेंट में आ रहा है तो उसमें कोटेशंस कितने लिए हमने, वो कोटेशन इंडिपेंडेंट लोगों ने खोला है कि नहीं खोला। सपोजली फाइनेंस को लैपटॉप्स परचेज करनी है, तो फाइनेंस का बंदा उसमें उस प्रोसेस में एट द टाइम ऑफ टेंडर या जो कोटेशन आप इनवाइट कर रहे हो, those quotation should not come to a finance person, it should come to another someone other than finance, या फिर कोई अपॉइंट किया जाना चाहिए जिसके पास ये कोटेशन जा रहा हो, ताकि फेयरली काम हो। ऐसा नहीं हो कि someone from the finance department is favoring someone of their known। तो रिस्क पॉइंट एक यहाँ पे ये रहा कि वी आर बाइंग अ लैपटॉप फ्रॉम समवन नोन, जिसका मार्केट वैल्यू से सपोजली 40,000 है, एंड क्योंकि आई एम फेवरिंग समवन, आई एम बाइंग द सेम लैपटॉप फॉर 45,000। तो अगर इंडिपेंडेंट कोर्ट अगर जा रहे हैं अदर देन द पर्सन हु इज रिक्वेस्टिंग दैट लैपटॉप, it will that particular thing can be ensured, risk has been reduced। सेकंड, अब लैपटॉप आ गई है, उसका प्रॉपर कैपिटलाइजेशन किस बेसिस पे हो रहा है। सो व्हेन वी आर मेकिंग दी कैपिटलाइजेशन, हमारा क्या रहता है, पुट टू यूज हमारा हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ है, या हमने परचेज कर लिया पुट टू यूज हमारे कुछ दिन बाद हुए, तो वो हमें चेक करना है कि जो हमारा डेप्रिसिएशन रेट चार्ज हो रहा है वो कब से हो रहा है, वो एज पर पुट टू यूज हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है, ना कि ऑन द डेट ऑफ परचेज हो गया। तो पुट टू यूज के बेसिस पे हम लोग डेप्रिसिएशन जब एफआईआर में डाल रहे हैं, दैट पुट टू यूज डेट शुड बी सर्टेन, उसका प्रॉपर डॉक्यूमेंटेशन शुड बी देयर कि इस डेट पे हुआ। जो भी पर्टिकुलर डिपार्टमेंट है उनका अप्रूवल्स है कि नहीं, कि ये डेट से है कि नहीं। सेकेंडली, सपोजली इफ आई हैव परचेज्ड एन एसेट, सपोजली आई हैव इंपोर्टेड दैट एसेट, तो प्रॉपर कस्टम्स हैव बीन पेड और नॉट, वो भी मेरा कैपिटलाइज हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है। सपोज इफ द फ्रेट इंश्योरेंस दैट इज देयर, दैट इज बीइंग कैपिटलाइज और नॉट, उसका प्रॉपर एक वर्किंग बनना चाहिए, उस पर अप्रूवल होना चाहिए, ताकि मेरा रिस्क ऑफ इनकरेक्ट कैपिटलाइजेशन एंड इनकरेक्ट रिकॉर्डिंग ऑफ एक्सपेंडिचर रेवेन्यू, पता चला कि हमने फ्रेट का एक्सपेंस हमने रेवेन्यू में डाल दिया, हाउएवर दैट शुड हैव बीन चार्ज इन दी कैपिटल, वो कैपिटलाइज होना चाहिए था, वो रिस्क भी कम हो गया। तो प्रॉपर वर्किंग रहेगा, एसओपी में डिफाइंड रहेगा, तो हमें पता रहेगा कि क्या एसओपी में ये भी डिफाइंड रहेगा कि व्हाट काइंड ऑफ एक्सपेंसेस दैट नीड्स टू बी देयर, दैट यू नीड टू कैपिटलाइज व्हेन यू आर बाइंग एन एसेट। अब सपोज इफ देयर इज अ ग्रांट दैट यू हैव रिसीव्ड फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट, उसका ट्रीटमेंट इसमें अगर प्रॉपर्ली होना है, तो ग्रांट हम रिड्यूस करें कि नहीं कर रहे, उसका अकाउंटिंग हमने प्रॉपर्ली इसमें लेस करके किया है कि नहीं किया। तो ये हमारे हो गए। अब सपोजली मेरा एसेट का वैल्यू इज अबव से 50 लाख या 1 करोड़ का है विद इन इंडिया, ये सपोजली एक हम करके चल रहे हैं, एंड टर्नओवर इज अबव 10 करोड़ एंड ऑल। तो अगर टीसीएस इफ नीड, टीसीएस तो हट गया, टीडीएस का है अभी भी, इफ टीडीएस प्रोविजन इफ एप्लीकेबल हैज बीन इंश्योर्ड और नॉट, देन उसका फ्रीक्वेंसी ऑफ पेमेंट क्या है, उसका पीओ प्रॉपर्ली क्रिएट हुआ था कि नहीं हुआ था, पीओ में टर्म्स मेंशन थे कि नहीं थे, पीओ के अगेंस्ट ही मेरा जीआरएन हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर एसेट। तो दिस आर द कंट्रोल मैट्रिक्स दैट इज डिफाइंड। तो ये पूरा एक प्रोसेस ड्राइव हो जाएगा, जहां लाइफ ऑफ द एसेट और सब चीज बनने के बाद वो रिव्यू होगा, एंड देन वो सिस्टम में पोस्ट होगा। तो दिस अ सिस्टम इन जनरल वे वी से दी, जो भी हम एंट्रीज करते हैं वो पाक होती है, पोस्ट नहीं होती है, पोस्ट आफ्टर अप्रूवल्स हो, ताकि एट द टाइम ऑफ व्हेन अप्रूवल्स हैव बीन डन, प्रॉपर चेंजेस कैन बिफोर पोस्टिंग इट इनटू फाइनेंशियल्स, उसके प्रॉपर अप्रूवल्स हमारे पास हो और अकाउंटिंग कैन बी इंश्योर्ड प्रॉपर्ली। कॉमन एंड कंट्रोल फेलियर्स, ये जैसे मैंने बोला, कंट्रोल्स आर ओवर रिडन। डायरेक्टर ने अगर एम्प्लॉय को बोला लोअर लेवल पे कि यू नीड टू पास दिस ट्रांजैक्शन एंड ही हैज डन इट, द प्रोविजन दैट हैज बीन क्रिएटेड, वो प्रोविजन गलत अमाउंट पे क्रिएट हुआ टू मैनेज द प्रॉफिट्स, इन्वेस्टर्स को बेटर पिक्चर दिखाने के लिए। तो ये दिस आर मैनुअल थिंग्स, जो कुछ कुछ चीजें होती है जो सिस्टम में नहीं हो सकती, बट एट द सेम टाइम व्हेन यू आर द ऑडिटर, यू कैन चेक वेदर दोज प्रोविजन एंट्रीज दैट इज बीइंग डन, उसका कोई बेसिस है या नहीं। खाली एडॉक बेसिस पे तो विल नॉट बी रिकॉर्डिंग द प्रोविजन, उसका कोई ना कोई एक एस्टिमेट होगा, उसका एस्टिमेशन विल चेक। एंड ये सब चीज ऐसा कि टॉप से नीचे आता है, ये लोअर लोगों के पास उतनी अथॉरिटीज नहीं होती ओवरराइड करने की। डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इज नॉट देयर, एसओडी अगर नहीं है, जैसे मैंने बोला कि मेकर भी मैं हूँ, चेकर भी मैं हूँ, परचेज भी मैं कर रहा हूँ, पेमेंट भी मैं कर रहा हूँ, तो कंट्रोल फेलियर होगा ही उसमें। अगर इफ आई एम डूइंग समथिंग दैट नीड्स टू बी अप्रूव्ड बाय माय सीनियर, सो दैट इफ एनीथिंग गोज रॉन्ग, मेरा गलती पकड़ में आ जाए, क्योंकि इफ यू आर अप्रूविंग समथिंग, तो आपका भी तो नाम जा रहा है उसमें, तो आपको पता है कि आप भी कुछ गलत चीज साइन नहीं करोगे। एंड इनएडिक्वेट मॉनिटरिंग, जैसे जो अपना क्वेरी का आया था, तो अगर मॉनिटर आप नहीं कर रहे हो तो कंट्रोल्स लगाने के बाद भी इट विल बी यूजलेस.
There's a question about how do we design internal control mechanism for cash and bank accounts. Priyanka wants to know.
आपका इन जनरल बड़े ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में ना जनरली कैश ट्रांजैक्शंस आर वेरी लेस, बट हाउएवर दैट कंट्रोल्स आपको ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्ट्रक्चर समझना पड़ेगा. जो मैंने आपको स्टार्टिंग में पैरामीटर्स बोले थे ना, हु आर द पीपल रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर इट. अब जैसे जो कैश एंड बैंक में दिस इज कॉमन एसओडी. द पर्सन हु इज मेकिंग द पेमेंट, हु इज इनिशिएटिंग द पेमेंट शुड नॉट बी अप्रूविंग इट. दिस इज द मतलब फॉर एनी कंट्रोल एसओडी इज अ बेसिक थिंग. एसओडी एंड डीओपी. जो एसओडी हो गया मेकर चेकर कंट्रोल, डीओपी हो गया डेलीगेशन ऑफ पावर्स. सपोज 10,000 रुपीज तक की पेमेंट का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी आई कैन डू विदाउट एनी अप्रूवल्स. 30,000 की पेमेंट्स है दैट नीड्स अप्रूवल ऑफ ए एंड बी. 50,000 से ऊपर है ए बी एंड सी के अप्रूवल्स चाहिए. तो वो अपने को डिफाइन करने पड़ेंगे. अब यहाँ पे अगेन क्वेरी कैन कम. सपोज आई हैव टू मेक 30,000 का पेमेंट, मैं 10,000 करके 3 बार कर दूंगा. दिस क्वेरी कैन कम. तो आपका उस सिस्टम में ऑटोमेटिकली सिस्टम शुड बी डिजाइन इन अ वे वेर वो आपको एक्सेप्शन थ्रो कर दे कि एक ही दिन में 10,000 करके 3 बार पेमेंट हुआ. वो पेमेंट अलाउ ही नहीं होना चाहिए विदाउट अप्रूवल ऑफ एनीवन एल्स. द सिस्टम शुड बी डिजाइन इन सच अ वे. एंड सपोजली अगर हो रहा है, सपोजली इफ दैट हैज हैपेंड, तो अगर आप मॉनिटर कर लोगे देन आपको उसको समझ में आ जाए कि वो 30,000 का पेमेंट हुआ, वो फ्रॉडुलेंट एक्टिविटी हो सकता है. आई नॉट से कि हुआ है बट हो सकता है. उस समय आप यू विल हैव टू इन्वेस्टिगेट इनटू दोज मैटर्स मोर रिगरसली एंड टेक मोर डॉक्यूमेंटेशन. एज आई मेंशन कि अगर मेरा प्रॉपर कंट्रोल्स आर एस्टैब्लिश्ड, विल बी मोर कंप्लायंट, विल बी मोर ऑडिट रेडी, हमारा एफिशिएंसी बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज होगा. दो एट टाइम्स देयर माइट बी सम डिले इन द डिसीजन दैट वी आर डूइंग, बट दैट विल हेल्प अस इंश्योर कि कहीं पे लीकेजेस नहीं हो कंपनी की, एंड एक स्ट्रॉन्ग गवर्नेंस अपने एस्टैब्लिश कर पाएंगे. So this is a roadmap how we should understand कि कैसा है. We need to do the review कि कहाँ पे क्या problems आ रही थी, risk assess करेंगे, कंट्रोल डिजाइन करेंगे, उसको फॉर्मुलेट करेंगे, कहाँ पे उसको टेक के साथ इंटीग्रेट कर सकते हैं, जैसे टीडीएस कंप्लायंस है या कुछ भी है, उसको हाउ वी कैन ट्राई टू एम्बेड दोज सिस्टम वैलिडेशन कंट्रोल्स इन आवर ईआरपी इटसेल्फ, एंड देन विल मॉनिटर इट कि कहीं पे कुछ गलत तो नहीं हो रहा. अगर गलत हो रहा है तो वो टाइमली फैशन में चेक हो जाए. सो एसओपीज और का मेन टेक अवेज रहेगा कि कंप्लायंस ऑटोमेटिकली हो जानी चाहिए, हमारा इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स प्रॉपर्ली डिफाइंड रहेगा, टेक एनेबल करेंगे, एंड अगर हमारा गवर्नेंस अच्छा रहेगा तो हमें स्केल करने में कभी प्रॉब्लम नहीं आएगी, दैट टू सस्टेनेबली. So this is all from my end. If there's anything, any query which is there, I'll be happy to answer it.
Yeah, Lakshmi wants to say something.
Hi, thank you so much for the session. It was good. But my question is more about the startup space where things are changing every day. How do you, if as a chartered accountant, if you're involved with them, what are some of the things to keep in mind when you try and implement these controls and SOPs in place?
First thing I'll tell the founders कि आपको इसको you will have to abide by the SOPs that we are making it. If you can't abide by the SOPs or controls or that frustrates you, then SOP and controls are not for you. Secondly, to ensure that they are more proactively taking it in a positive way, I'll say that if supposedly if your controls are designed properly, even though you might not be that profitable, or supposedly if you are very profitable, when due diligence is being done of your company, and if the investors find that there are several control lapses, there are several accounting lapses, there are non-compliances, then instead of investing in you, they'll say that we don't want to invest, they will exit. Even prior to funding in other money, they will say goodbye. So when investors जो startups के रहते हैं ना, they need funds. तो that is something that can trigger them कि supposedly if अगर आप ये नहीं करते हो आपको फंडिंग मिलने में डिफिकल्टी होगी, या स्टार्टिंग में supposedly commitments are there, you might sign term sheet also, but when FDD is being done, then at that given point of time you will find many hiccups, and because of which supposedly starting may they were being offered X valuation. After those compliances, non-compliances, yeah, those less controlled environment, your valuation will come from X to X minus Y.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions? Anyone else wants to ask anything else? So I have a question. If
Yes.
you want to actually give an advice as to what would be the most imperative thing that an startup organization is trying to scale up should keep in mind while they are looking at the internal controls and SOPs, what would that be? That one critical aspect that needs to be kept in mind. I
I
heard
would
that organization structure, the fact that you have risk assessments, the fact that you have exceptional reports and mapping of the exceptional reporting, as well as the being consistent with the dynamic changes that are being brought into the regulatory framework, right? So all these have to be kept into mind when you're framing your internal controls as well as your SOPs. But what is the basic critical aspect that one thing that they should be actually doing if they're not doing everything in consistency or following?
I'll say they just need to focus on for control. From control point of view, they should understand that a faster decision if they are, when they are overriding any kind of controls, or they when they are delegating any task, they should understand whether that overriding activity that they are doing will that help them to achieve what they are doing in a correct way. Supposedly अगर supposedly उनको अगर supposedly whatever task they are doing, I understand there can be some urgencies and all, but supposedly if that urgencies can be postponed by a little delay, say by a day or two, if that can happen, they should understand that they should not override their controls. Because when investors are also there are getting onboarded now, when they tell you, when the founders are telling the investors, this will take time because of the control mechanisms in place, and those since those require approvals, internal approvals amongst the various departments, they will also understand, because the investors also understand that controls are important, because when they come into the picture, they want something, they want a positive exit from the startup they are investing in. So they will understand that controls are important, and for that a little delay can help them to scale better. So one thing is there that they should not try to override the controls.
Right, that is currently a big challenge as we see it. But I think I like your aspect of saying how you actually put a threat in them by saying, if you didn't follow this, you'll get into trouble. I like that. Yeah.
See, ultimately everyone they are into business, so
Yeah,
for doing business they will need capital, and
right,
if they supposedly आज उनको 100 रुपए मिल रहे हैं at 1000 rupees valuation, and suppose tomorrow they are getting rupees 100 only, but at 900 rupees valuation, that will pinch them.
right. Yeah,
So at that point of time, see, we as professions can't say them that they do this or do that. What we can say, we can show them the picture and say that
whatever
decision
change.
is yours.
In the
So this
future,
is the harm that will happen.
yes, yes. That's a good approach. Thank you. Yeah,
Ultimately, they are the business owners.
right,
We as professions can't control their business. We as professionals can only suggest them.
right, right. Yeah, right.
Any other queries?
पहली वाला जो दर्शन का है उसके लिए आप दर्शन का नाम यूज करें, सेकेंडली वाला वो मार्शल का।
And in the end, I'll just say internal audit focus of us of the professional should shift from internal audits to risk-based audits. That is something which will help us to provide better services and more effective and efficient services to our clients. Though risk-based audit is an extension of internal audit itself, but it will help us in by providing better services.
So do you do this kind of work from scratch where you set up internal audit systems?
Yes, we do
Sure.
that.
Nice. If I need some help, I'll connect with you on this.
Sure, sure,
Thank you.
sure.
नहीं, अभी जो आपका इनका पैन बेस्ड लॉगिन है ना AAA का, उसमें जो है उसके बाद जो डिटेल्स ये सारे मेरे को पॉपुलेट करने हैं मैंने कर दिए हैं, बट प्रॉब्लम
Okay, anyone has their queries?
Sorry.
I think sir, all किसी को कोई query वगैरह कोई question? So looking
Definitely, if there are any queries, I have provided my email ID and my contact number. You guys can definitely get in touch with me.
लॉगिन को इंडिपेंडेंट करने की तरह के नहीं करना है।
big thank you to you, CA Jagrit Dinani sir, for such a power-packed and insightful session. The way you broke down internal controls, SUPs, and even linked it with real-world practice and AI, that was truly next
वो
level.
अपने ऑल्टर नहीं करता।
Welcome,
Thank you so much, sir.
welcome.
Thank
I would
you.
definitely like to be part of more such sessions in future.
Sure.
And thank you so much for a nice session, sir.
Thank you, Ashwini ji.
And we are having a certificate, but Sunita is on the way to log in. But she is getting some trouble in logging into the session.
No issues.
So if anyone is having questions and all, we can continue for a little while by the time we receive the certificate.
Issues. Definitely, that's not an issue per se. But as since most of us are into practice itself, I'll say कि at startup world में there are founders who are many a times from a non-finance background. So at times explaining them stuffs can be a little difficult. But at the same time, when you are going them with a proactive approach, I in my reasoning, in my experience, I have seen them to comply with those things. थोड़े hurdles face करने पड़ते हैं, थोड़ा extra time उनको devote करना पड़ता है, but at the same time once they are through with it, they do understand, they do implement all these things. But initially they won't do it. When there are only 4, 5, 10 members, they won't do it. When their team starts growing, then they will definitely understand, because at that given point of time they have resources to manage things. So इसलिए मैंने स्टार्टिंग में बोला कि उनका अगर स्ट्रक्चर वैसा नहीं है ना, तो उस समय आप इवन इफ यू वांट टू एस्टैब्लिश कंट्रोल्स ना, दे वोंट, क्योंकि उनको उस समय दे आर ओनली 4 or 5 people who are doing everything. So the kind of work they want to do, the amount of hard work they need to put in, that is more. So at that given point of time, we can't expect them to ensure कि controls रहे. उस समय उनको ये रहता है ना कि business build करना है. But once that business gets building, एक initial stage से थोड़े ऊपर आ जाते हैं ना, team बनना start हो जाती है, then they will definitely take all these things positively.
Yeah, I do see that challenge even in very large companies. I used to be in companies where they do these outsourcing contracts, B2C, P2P. They have their own set of very strong processes that they need to follow, and they're measured against it. And being an internal auditor and putting an SOP sometimes becomes a little meaningless when they have the ERP has its own SOP, the other processes have their own SOP. So it's integrating all of it and looking at it together is also a challenge sometimes. You have
Yeah,
any
when
thoughts on that?
See, when you have outsourced your work, then the control is not there. So at that time, what you can do is that, जैसे supposedly you have outsourced your payroll activity. That is a very common thing that is being outsourced by many startups. At that given point of time, you can add in the service level agreement itself, in the SLAs itself, you can mention that these are the basic checks that you need to ensure. And if that is not being ensured, then they will be penalized. The third party agencies to whom it has been outsourced, they will be penalized. So if they want business, say up supposedly like uh, Pagar Book and there are other companies who are into Razorpay and there are other companies who are doing the outsourcing work for payroll. आप उनके साथ जल्दी से negotiate नहीं कर सकते unless until you have that kind of मतलब number of team members are there. Supposedly if you're paying them supposedly 10 from 20,000 per month and you expect them to uh, design their controls as per you, that is not possible. उनके पास भी एक ticket size होना चाहिए so that they listen to you. So agar if you are having that bargaining control in your hand, then they will accept.
I think Sunita's here. I'll check with her if she's there or not.
Yeah, hi, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Power blackout, that this is what we have in the modern world, right? Connectivity is there, yet we are actually dependent on the powers backup and all. I'll just share certificate.
And meanwhile, I also want to thank Sunita ji for asking some good questions and making the session more interesting. Thank you, Sunita ji, as well.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank the audience, our speaker, for actually taking the time out and sharing his views and his experience in the domain of internal controls and the need for having SOPs. Our participants and our community who took the time out and sat through, and our very young moderator, Shruti Shaw, who was here and moderated the session. And most of all, to last but not the least, to the community of the core community of Friday Fleet, whose efforts we are able to bring and such eminent speakers and have them share their time, their experience, and their the valuable insights that we need to keep in mind when we are working in their professional roles. As a token of appreciation for our speaker today, I would like to share the certificate. For sharing your views, your experience, your knowledge in guiding us through the specifics that we need to keep in mind when we are advising organizations and when we are actually helping the organizations in the changing environment. Reporting and numbers are not just what is required. We also need to be facilitators for our businesses and advisors for our businesses to help them set up compliant systems, as well as you mentioned, sustainable practices, business practices. So from that perspective, it is very, very important for us to have discussions on these topics and ensure that we are compliant with the changes that are being brought up, how well versed we are with the repercussions of the digitalization of the world, as well as the implications on our reporting aspects and our the accountability that we have to set procedures and help our clients set procedures and follow the compliances. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. for taking the time out and bearing with me for my technical glitches, the connectivity issues. And we hope to have another session on this because it's a very critical aspect, and we need to keep in mind the requirements and the need of the hour based on the changing dynamic scenarios. So thank you so much. Have a great Friday evening as well as a great weekend.
Thank you very much for inviting me and to be part of this community. And I'll be happy to answer any queries in personal as well, if any. So kindly feel free to reach out.
So we do get requests for the PPTs that have been shared. So if you don't mind, if you could share the PPTs with the
Sure,
group.
I'll share.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next Friday.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Shruti. Thank you.